Well, first of all, Richie, welcome back to the Frontier Podcast. Always a joy to have you. The transition, Ben, to being outnumbered.
We are getting past the fog. We are just about. She is 6 weeks as of the Monday.
Oh my gosh!
So we're hitting the ground running and hopefully getting there to the final point where it's like 4 months has always been our like point where it's like, okay, you hit 4 months and they can actually like get into a sleep schedule. And so it's just like, let's get to that 4 month mark. And then
I love that you have a data-based strategy now to rearing children.
Yes, we have a time point where it's like, all right, this is when we're good.
How's everybody else adapting to older sibling life?
Yeah, actually our our two older ones have been excellent and love her and try and love up on her a little too much. And
that's sweet.
So
what's the age difference?
My daughter is 5.5 and James, my son, is 3.5, just about 4.
I didn't realize we had 2 Jameses on the next generation of the team.
Yep.
That's such a good age gap because I feel like it's enough where they're like at very clearly different phases of development and thus can be charged with taking care of each other at various stages of their lives.
Absolutely. They play together and can do their own thing. And I think that makes it way easier than when we went from 1 to 2, just because she was only 1.5. And so she still needed a lot of attention and help. And
yeah. But what's cool is I feel like there's a solid 10 years where regardless of the age difference, there's some things you can do that everybody's happy with, right? Even if it's not exactly developmentally appropriate. Like I'm the youngest of 3. And I feel like my family was like, you don't want to do calculus? Tough shit, 6-year-old. Like that's what your brother's doing. But it was fun, you know? I think I got to like watch a lot of movies that were probably over my head, and adventure science centers are a thing in Nashville, and it's the same thing. It's like, babies like the lights and the 8-year-olds are like reading the placards. So
yes, totally. I am the youngest of. I have 3 older sisters too, and they're 8 years older and 10 years older, and it's like the youngest gets to do things that the first child never gets to because of just the age gap and differences. And
it's the best.
Yep,
it is the best.
Absolutely.
But speaking of cross-generational entertainment and delight, this is probably the This Week in Tech History episode I'm most excited for this very reason. I could sit and watch a Pixar movie today as a 30-year-old the same way I could 25 years ago. The event this week that we're talking about is Pixar winning an Oscar for an animated film called Tin Toy. On March 29th, 1989, Pixar's Tin Toy became the first CGI film to win an Academy Award. But how Pixar came to the world in the first place is a story in its own right. So it began as a computer division of Lucasfilm. I had no clue that it was at all related to Lucasfilm. So that's huge. So it started as a computer division of Lucasfilm and was later renamed Pixar, where they worked on developing the Pixar Image Computer. The computer was originally aimed at scientific and high-end visualization markets like medicine, geophysics, and meteorology. While the high cost of the PIC made it prohibitive for large-scale use in those arenas, what a bummer, it found a home in the digital animation space thanks to an investment from then-owner Steve Jobs. I did not know that either. This is wild. The world is so small. In the spring of 1988, cash flow was running low at Pixar, and the entertainment division wasn't feeling the love. In a last-ditch effort to secure funding for the firm despite widespread cuts to other parts of the business, director John Lasseter presented Jobs with storyboards for the 5-minute short. And Jobs loved it so much that he invested $300K of his own money to fund the project, saying, "All I ask of you, John, is to make it great." Tin Toy is a story, this is going to sound very familiar, of a small tin toy that finds itself living with a rambunctious toddler who plays too roughly and makes Tinny, the toy, unhappy. Tinny tries to hide under a couch only to discover the trove of other toys also hiding from the boy. This short film ultimately became the basis for the famed Toy Story franchise, which rocketed Pixar to global fame. In 2003, Tin Toy was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry by the Library of Congress for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And to date, Pixar has won 23 Academy Awards, 10 Golden Globe Awards, and 11 Grammy Awards. So close to an EGOT. So close. Among numerous other accomplishments. So, to start, Richie, what is your definitive tier 1 all-time favorite Pixar film? Go.
I think it's got to be Toy Story.
The OG.
I think it's the OG. I love Toy Story 2 as well, but those two are cemented. I think I can literally remember going and watching Toy Story in the theater, and like I was with my grandpa and my dad, and I can just remember being blown away. And I just watched Toy Story 3 days ago. And I do have kids, so I watch a lot of Disney and Pixar.
Yeah.
And so we are on rotation, but I think that one still wins for me.
Man, I have the same memories. And what's funny is I was going through the Wikipedia list, and I got to the ones like Cars, Ratatouille, Wall-E, and I was like, those are so new. Of course I haven't seen them yet. And in fact, they are not new. They came out in the early 2000s. But in my frame of reference, I kind of have to say Monsters, Inc. I don't know. There's just so many one-liners that have worked their way into my daily vernacular that I'm pretty sure come from Monsters, Inc. and The Incredibles.
Ironically, I was reading about Pixar and Toy Story last night for this, and Billy Crystal was up for Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story, and he declined it because he didn't think it was going to become something.
Wow.
But then they brought him back for Monsters, Inc.
Wait, who is Billy Crystal in Monsters, Inc.?
He's the green monster with the single eyeball.
Oh my God. Of course.
What's his face? I can't think of his name now.
Yes. Not Sully.
No, the other one.
God damn it. This is terrible. The fact that I'm going to have to put a Monsters, Inc. character in the show notes.
Mike
Wazowski.
Yeah.
Yep. I also love Up. I feel like I can't watch Up without getting a little teary. And I think that's a defining characteristic of Pixar.
Yeah. And for me, I love Up in terms of just the dynamic of it, but it isn't something I can watch over and over again. Like, it's not something I go to because of the emotional kind of drive of it. So like Cars and Toy Story are kind of the two that I can put on repeat and watch. Although I've watched Ratatouille quite a bit as well. I skipped the first like 15-20 minutes where it's like all these mice running through her ceilings and whatnot, because like I've experienced mice in my ceilings and it's awful. So I skipped to the part where he's more human.
I love that you have like a strategy, like emotional preservation strategy for watching Pixar movies. I feel like we chose the right super fan for this episode.
Oh yeah, I'm invested in Pixar and invested in their movies, and yes, I do pick and choose based on emotion.
I feel like you and I being in the target audience for when Pixar first started releasing films in the mid to late 90s, means that we're probably in this. You may feel the same way. I often am watching movies, even if they're not animated films, but I know that they're CGI, and I still always say out loud, like, man, computers are so cool. And I think the generation that came after us, where you weren't watching like claymation or actual like drawn animation, they don't have that same kind of like reverence and shock at what a computer can do.
Yeah, it's just such a stark contrast, because I can remember like Disney in their animation, I can't remember which film it was, whether it was Lion King or earlier than that, but they did this special panning where it started to create kind of a 3D effect. And so they had like multiple artboards, and the way they could slide it gave it kind of more of a dimensional look.
Mm,
And I can remember being like, oh, that's a cool tech, but like this contrast between what Pixar then came out with this 3D CGI kind of feel was just like, whoa, like we're
hmm.
taking this to a whole new level of computers. And the thing about Toy Story that's always so funny to me is like, I think it took a day to render 30 seconds of the movie or something like
No way.
yeah, the sheer amount of time it took to render out the first one was just like crazy.
You know what's crazy to me is I always forget, even though like I am still in that headspace of like, man, computers are so cool. Look what we can do with CGI. For some reason, I think of the technology industry and the entertainment industry as totally siloed. When obviously there's a ton of overlap. Like Steve Jobs was the investor in the first Pixar short film. That's a fascinating part of this story of Tin Toy, how like to save essentially to like save this the business that Pixar was, they were like, okay, fine, we'll pivot to entertainment instead of this other stuff we were building for because it's such a cash cow, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think of like all the other examples of that phenomenon in tech today, or maybe even 10 years ago. Like, do you remember the obsession with building games? I was like, oh, we're gonna build games and we're gonna make a bunch of money on ads. And it's like, well, yeah, because entertainment is a cash cow. It's like consumers will pay to be entertained. Will businesses pay for software? Not always, but consumers will pay you $1, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's where I can see why the pivot from science and into entertainment happened, because I feel like certain industries, it's a hard sell to use technology for certain things, or how much is this going to cost us. First, like entertainment, I feel like throws a lot of money at a lot of things that don't end up being successful.
Mm-hmm.
Though I know Pixar was like always on the brink of failing, but
Yeah.
you have to have someone for technology that is willing to back you and basically fight to the death for it. And I feel like that's why Pixar succeeded, because you had Jobs, and then you had Lasseter, a couple others, Pete Docter and Andrew Stanton, who
Mm.
just kind of were like, we're gonna,
We're gonna make this work.
yeah, it's gonna happen, and we're gonna do it no matter what. And
Well, it's interesting because it started with the technology, right? It was like, okay, so we've got this. Here's our use cases. What were their intended use cases? Medicine, geophysics, and meteorology. The challenge was like, which industry is this actually going to stick in? And of course, now we know like if Pixar can do what they do with CGI, then the opportunities for those industries are endless. But in terms of adoption, I do think kind of the release into the entertainment industry and the animation for consumption made a difference in those industries being willing to adopt it.
mm-hmm, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
I'm curious because obviously you're an engineer on our team. If you were to put yourself in the shoes of an engineer working at Pixar before this pivot, and you know, your intentions were to build for something like medicine or geophysics or meteorology, something that's really going to have a huge impact on the world, and then what you built was pivoted to like children's movies, how would you feel? What would your take be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be hard, especially because like we have the advantage of hindsight. So like Pixar did change the world, and like you and I can reminisce about going to a movie theater and seeing a Pixar film, and like Pixar's known for their emotions. But when you are building something and then it pivots and you don't see that fruition for 10, 15, 20 years, it's like, yeah, I'd be disappointed. I'd be like, why are we doing this? Especially because like I feel like that time, like I feel like Pixar was probably 10 years before their time almost. Like they
Mm,
created an industry off of it. And so he had no frame of reference. It was just like, yeah, we're building something and now we're pivoting to some entertainment thing. Like this makes zero sense. The fight is real in certain areas of trying to advance them, and so like I'm sure a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into trying to help meteorology and science and all that. And I'm sure a lot of them were disappointed that it
Yeah.
was.
I mean, obviously, like you said, hindsight's 2020, and today we can see that the technology has permeated all kinds of industries and use cases. But I would love to have a time machine or just like speak with somebody who was in the room, because obviously you imagine the success of Pixar animation technology. They won an Oscar in 1989. And of course, when a company, specifically their technology, has success like that, there's a huge instinct to protect it, right? If another company got its hands on Pixar's animation technology, that sucks. That's your competitive advantage, and now everybody has it. But we also know that that animation technology makes a huge difference, even if we just think about medical use cases, right? Like using that technology for ultrasounds, right? Like there's so many use cases that make a huge difference for the greater good. And in those cases, it's like, yeah, of course we want to open source it. Like, how do you navigate protecting IP for use in industries that are competitive with yours, with releasing your technology so that folks can use it for the greater good? Or do you just say, screw it, there's no balance, you got to choose one side or the other?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. And it's probably easier to answer than if I actually had some intellectual property that did would make me millions or something. As I recall, and this could be wrong, so I understand I might be saying something wrong, but Pixar, when they did it, they did eventually release some of their technology. And I know some of it was for like funneling back into their own system, as I recall. So like
Mm.
you could use Pixar software. It was basically like, hey, so that you can learn and then come work for us and do better. And then like there was projects that came from that that were then open source. Like the open sourced one is Blender, which is the 3D modeling software.
I didn't know that that came from Pixar.
I don't think it came directly from Pixar, but it was a side product of seeing kind of what Pixar, yeah, and like, so like some of it is like when people see something, they can, you know, figure out how it works and imitate it. And I think like some of that is a benefit.
That technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hard thing is we always see the end results, and like,
Yeah.
Pixar was 5 years trying to make the first film, and then just to be like, here, have our software that we spent 5 years of stress and whatever, like feels a little bit like, I don't know that I'd be willing to do that. And I don't think, they didn't either, but it was, yeah, it's an interesting balance of what to do.
Yeah. I think the rule of innovation, just listening to you talk, I've decided this is my opinion. I think the rule of innovation is like if you create something brand new that is kind of like it's a step change for your industry, it's only a matter of time before everyone else figures out how to do that too. Like, look at AI chatbots right now. It's not a coincidence that everybody is releasing their own version of it, in short order. So I think the rule is like, rather than protecting what you've built, you need to constantly be innovating and iterating and trying to stay one step ahead of your competition, assuming that they're going to do the thing that you just did pretty shortly after you. So it's kind of unfortunately, a never ending marathon. I know that's probably bad news for people who are hoping that their next big break will just get them set for life.
Yeah, it's a copycat world. I mean, you can
Mm-hmm.
look at different products and just see the trajectory of everything changing, like the iPhone touchscreen,
Yep.
the iPod, like you can go Apple for about 5 years where they basically shifted entire markets based on what they came out with. And then you look at a smartphone now and everything is a touchscreen. We've all gotten smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're going back to bigger, but it's like, it's a copycat.
Yeah, for better or for worse too. Like I
Right.
think inevitably competition and pressure to do better is good for free markets. So I
Mm-hmm.
can appreciate the copycat mentality. Still, I think kind of scary when you come out with something as innovative as an animated film like Tin Toy, which I've never seen, but I think I'm going to watch tonight before I watch the season
Yeah,
finale.
you should watch it. I watched it last night. It's 5 minutes. It's not too bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really
Cool.
short.
I'll do that as either like a warm up or a cool down from the season finale of Last of Us. Because I've realized, have you been watching Last of Us?
I haven't taken a dive yet. I've heard really good things. I don't have HBO Max at the moment, so
yeah, I'm glad I'm watching it. It is a feat of emotional and mental strength. And it takes a toll on my body and just like internal stress. I'm constantly like pausing it to see how much time we have left. It's like a workout when you're like, all right, I can stay with it for 15 more minutes. So maybe I'll do Tin Toy as a cool down because I certainly need something after that for some levity.
Yes, and see, I that's not my type of show at night. Like after a day of work and whatnot, it's like I just need something to zone out on.
Yeah. I need, after this, it is all mindless TV. I think I need like a full 365 days to cool down from it. So we'll start with Tin Toy. Richie, this was so much fun. I don't know if Abby intended to bring on a resident Pixar expert such as yourself, but
I don't know that I would say I'm an expert, but I do love Pixar. So
yeah, I learned a lot. And although I'm not a parent, I might join you in rewatching Toy Story this weekend just for kicks.
It's good they've redone it, so it's better quality now than it was when they originally released it.
Oh, I didn't know that. You know what's shameful is I've never seen any of the Toy Story sequels. So maybe I'll just do a little binge.
See, and so like that's an interesting thing too, because Pixar, so back in the day, sequels were just kind of one-offs and they just were like go direct to video type of behavior.
Yeah.
And Pixar was like, no, we're going to make something valuable that's a second edition and not make it. So like it was a hard sell to get Toy Story 2 because everyone just kind of assumed it was going to be terrible because that's how all sequels were. And they were like, no, we're going to actually put value into it. And so then Toy Story 2 came about and started a new trend of sequels being seen as another moneymaker.
So what you're telling me is it's worth spending my money binging Toy Story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Toy Story 2 is almost better than Toy Story 1.
No way.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that Toy Story 4 it came out 4 years ago.
It did, and supposedly Toy Story 5 is in the works.
You know what? I'm going to pregame this binge today, just listening to some Randy Newman playlists.
Hey, there you go.
That's the other thing with Pixar.
That would do it for you. That would make you just want to watch a Pixar movie.
That music will get you. Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast powered by Gun.io. We drop 2 episodes per week, so if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and come hang out with us again next week and bring all your internet friends. If you have questions or recommendations, just shoot us a Twitter DM at The Frontier Pod, and we'll see you next week.